Hey there, Dr. Mark here, and today I'm going to show you how to get your nutrition clients to stick to their diet so you can help them get better results, which is going to be the difference maker in growing your nutrition coaching business and getting more clients, as well as building your confidence as a coach. You can have the most experience, knowledge, and credentials in the world, but none of this matters if your clients don't listen and execute on what you have to say. So let me show you the strategies to make this happen. Let's dive in. Starting with my secret strategy, number 1, flex days. A flex day is where our nutrition client tracks their intake for the majority of the day to a reduced calorie, higher protein target that gives them a bit of a calorie buffer. What it looks like is this: 50 to 60% of their total normal calories and a bit more protein than they would normally eat at that time, upwards of 60 to 70% of their protein target. Then after 3 or 4 p.m., the client can take the night off to eat like a normal person. This is ideal for family meals or parties where a client really shouldn't need to guesstimate or track at all. What a flex day does do is gives the client a little bit of structure, so the entire day isn't a wash, but still gets them away from those objective components of food. This works best for a client that has a hard time navigating meals without structure. See, as a nutrition coach, you can't just give people a rigid plan and expect them to follow it. They're going to have social events and things that come up. And of course, you could say, just stick to the plan, but that's not really realistic. You could also say, one day isn't going to really ruin your progress. And of course, one day isn't. The issue becomes if they have a hard time getting back on track, unless you tell them and guide them on exactly what to do, and even show them what a day with some deviations would look like. That's why I love the flex day. Here's how exactly it would work with an example. If a client's normal food levels are like this: 1,800 calories, 140 grams of protein, 200 grams of carbohydrates, and 50 grams of fat, then a flex day would look like this: 1,000 calories, 80 grams of protein, 100 grams of carbs, and around 30 grams of fat, plus an untracked meal including no restrictions and maybe a few alcoholic beverages. In my experience, after routinely using this in my coaching practice, the easiest way to schedule the flex day is during a nighttime meal, but you can easily enough schedule this into lunchtime or even a brunch or breakfast. Now you may be asking, what is the difference between this and something like a cheat meal? There is a difference both in the structure and the way the client actually views the day. See, a cheat meal reinforces the concept that there's some foods that the client just shouldn't eat, but in reality there's no good or bad foods, just better or worse choices depending on their goals and situation. Working in a flex day gives a client some flexible control, eating more like a quote-unquote normal person without labeling anything as good or bad. We're just getting away from the numbers. Now keep in mind, this isn't really possible if your clients aren't already tracking their nutrition. And this is one of the reasons why I'm such a huge advocate of nutritional tracking for both the client and also the coach. Because when we track, we have better control of the things that matter for results, like calories and macronutrient intake, but we also have better awareness and nutritional knowledge around food choices. So there's too many benefits of tracking not to use it as your main coaching tool. And you could also use strategies like this next one to keep clients on track. Number 2, let's talk about refeeds. After clients have been dieting for an extended period of time, it's common for hunger levels to increase and energy levels to drop. And this can make it hard to continue the diet. One strategy that makes this more manageable from both a psychological and physiological perspective is the refeed. A refeed is typically a one-day higher carb day where clients work up their carbohydrate intake to replenish their glycogen stores. This helps manage both short-term and long-term appetite, as well as energy levels and training performance. For most clients, this will look like increasing their calories by 10 or 20% towards maintenance calorie levels, making up the difference from carbohydrates. And this usually means adding in 50 to 200 grams for a client. So going back to our first example, for our client eating 1,800 calories with 140 grams of protein, 200 grams of carbohydrates, and 50 grams of fat, their refeed numbers are going to look like 140 grams of protein, 280 grams of carbohydrate, and 50 grams of fat. Some coaches may decrease protein and add in a little bit of fat to keep the overall calories in check and just give a little more flexibility to food choice, but the main intent to a refeed is adding in more carbohydrate. Some clients may want to work in some higher carb food choices that they typically wouldn't eat, like ice cream or pasta, where others just want to eat their normal carb choices in higher amounts. This really will depend on their ability to work in those carbohydrate choices in a set amount without feeling the urge to overdo it. Not everyone is the same, so this does take a little bit of practice. Now, refeeds are great when clients want a little bit of a break, but we still want the client to have adequate control over what they're eating. But there are going to be times where we want the client to get away from the objective side of the numbers entirely, which is when you're going to do this. Number 3, mindful eating. Don't get this confused. My entire nutrition coaching practice is built around the objective side of nutrition, prescribing food and macronutrient targets for a client's individual goals, then getting there by coaching them with strategic action items. This gets fantastic results, teaches a client about their own nutrition, and does help to grow your coaching business. But there is always a time and a place. A time to track everything you eat, and also a time not to. Vacations are a perfect example and time where a client probably shouldn't track. But as always, this is within reason. So your clients still have goals and they don't want to just simply erase all of their progress. So there needs to be balance, and working in some elements of mindful eating does help with this. Mindful eating is the practice of being fully aware of the food that you're eating, so you can improve greater control over your eating habits. When done properly, mindful eating includes eating slowly and without distraction, when physically hungry and until the client is full, with the intent to improve their overall health. But also it helps to be able to distinguish between hunger and non-hunger triggers like boredom, manage guilt and anxiety around food, and helps the client to appreciate the food that they're eating. In an ideal world, you get a client to focus on some of these parameters even if they are tracking. It doesn't need to be so black and white. But in situations when it's hard or even impossible to track, they can replace the need to look at food objectively with mindful eating, which is perfect for holidays, especially if it's just for a few days. And even as you work with a client for longer and you start to work through that coaching life cycle, mindful eating can help prepare a client to be less reliant on tracking. Here's one of my favorite exercises to do this. Ask a client this: what would happen if you had no access to your food tracking app for the day? What would happen if Chronometer or Macro Factor or MyFitnessPal went down? How would you navigate eating? This exercise, even if it's just for a meal or for a day, is a great chance to practice some mindful eating practices. Ideally, the client would eat really similarly with less attachment around the numbers. When we go into periods where it's not realistic to track, here's the structure I set for clients. Try to prioritize protein around 20 to 30 grams every time you eat. Eat a serving of fruit and or vegetable at every meal. Stay active, try to eat slowly and until around 80% full. Don't be restrictive with food choices. And when possible, eat with friends and family and don't have distractions. If you wanted to, you could get more specific with these parameters and have a sliding scale for each one of them, getting a client to rate how they did over the course of the day. These mindful eating scales give nutrition clients the structure they need to take time off without much impact on the results, and it all comes down to awareness around what they're eating. Additionally, it's important to have conversations around non-negotiables because this gives the client a chance to finally assess what matters to them when it comes to food and what they want to do with their food choices and actions. I just had a client planning a girls' weekend away. These weekends don't happen all the time for her, and when she does get together with her girlfriends, she tends to have a few more drinks, which leads to more snacking. But she did say she didn't really enjoy the snacking aspect, but she likes to enjoy a few drinks with her girlfriends. So we're starting to build some context and awareness around what she wants to do. A few drinks, yes, but snacking, no. So the advice that I gave her during this weekend was have a few alcoholic drinks, but try to limit the snacking because you don't really enjoy it. And this is what setting non-negotiables is all about. Creating a well-balanced nutrition plan that is flexible but still gets results. It's these type of strategies and clear communication that allows a client to stick to their plan without burning out. I actually just had this conversation with another long-term nutrition client just last week. He's going on a trip to Europe with his son for an entire week. Things are going well for him. He's really happy with his progress, but during this trip, he said, and I quote, "I don't want to be lugging any protein powder around." Just from this comment, I have a pretty good idea of how he wants to navigate the trip. So for this time away, here's the specific advice I gave him. Number one, there's no need to track, but number two, prioritize protein around 25 plus grams every time you eat. Number three, try to include one serving of fruit and or vegetable every time you eat. Number four, keep activity levels high, especially walking. And number five, nothing is off limits, but eat when you're hungry and until you're full. This was the mindful eating advice and structure I gave him. Now keep in mind, this wasn't forever. It was just a week that he was away. But I also did this. I gave him specific timelines around when this advice applied to, when it would start, and when things would go back to business as normal, especially since his normal check-in day wasn't the first day he was going to be back. So he knew what to do in the exact next steps upon his return. I also know from experience getting back into the swing of things can be hard. So the re-entry plan is important. Taking time off isn't the problem, it's how long that time lasts. So another thing that I did to encourage him before he left was to plan one thing that was going to help him get back into the swing of things when he got back, like cooking a freezer meal or even pre-ordering groceries. This is the type of stuff and good coaching that allows clients to take time off, get a break, but also keep their results and get right back to it. But the key here is knowing what is going on with them, so you gotta ask good questions, which is why I include the question in my weekly check-ins: what do we need to plan for this week? Is there birthday parties? Is there vacation? Because it allows me to give the best coaching advice and create a plan they can stick to. And that's it, folks. Those are 3 strategies I use to help my nutrition clients stick to their plan. And as great as all those tips are, if you're really serious about starting a nutrition coaching business, the next thing I'll have you do is check out this video I've linked up right here. Today we learned about a whole bunch of ways to increase client adherence. Now learn about my secret strategy to perform better nutrition client check-ins. So make sure to check it out now, and I'll see you in the next video.